The death penalty in America is a subject that stirs deep emotions, anger, sorrow, and questions about justice. Since 1976, when the Supreme Court reinstated capital punishment, only 18 women have faced execution in the United States, a fraction compared to the hundreds of men. But who were these women? What crimes were so heinous that they led to the ultimate punishment? Tonight, we unravel the stories of 10 women whose actions shocked the nation, women whose names became synonymous with evil. Their crimes were brutal, their trials divisive, and their final moments haunting. Join us as we step into the shadows of death row, where the clock ticks down to justice or retribution. And don't forget to like and subscribe to be part of our growing community. In a quiet North Carolina town in 1978, a 47-year-old grandmother named Velma Barfield seemed like an unlikely monster. Known for her warm smile and church-going ways, she was a pillar of her community. But beneath this facade lay a chilling secret. Velma had a dark obsession with poison, and her victims were those closest to her, including her own mother and her fiancé, Stuart Taylor, a 56-year-old widower and farmer who trusted her completely. Stuart was a hard-working man, a father who had rebuilt his life after losing his wife. He and Velma shared dreams of a simple future together, but Velma had other plans. Driven by greed and a need to cover her debts from forged checks, she began lacing Stuart's food and drinks with arsenic, a slow and agonizing poison. Over days, Stuart suffered excruciating pain, vomiting, diarrhea, and searing abdominal cramps. He died in February 1978. His death initially ruled as natural, but Velma's pattern of death followed her. Her mother, Lyon Bullard, 65, had died similarly in 1974, and so had two others she cared for, John Henry Lee, 76, and Dolly Edwards, 80. Suspicion grew when Velma's forged checks came to light, and an autopsy on Stuart revealed lethal levels of arsenic. The evidence was overwhelming, pointing to a calculated serial killer who preyed on trust. The investigation began when Velma's son reported her suspicious behavior to police. Detectives uncovered a trail of poison purchases and forged financial documents. Velma confessed, admitting to 4 murders, though she claimed her intent was only to make them sick to buy time for her debts. Her trial in 1978 gripped North Carolina. Prosecutors painted her as a cold-blooded black widow, motivated by greed. Her defense argued addiction to prescription drugs clouded her judgment, but the jury didn't believe her story. After a swift deliberation, Velma, then 47, was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, becoming the first woman in the U.S. to face execution by lethal injection. Appeals dragged on for 6 years, with her lawyers citing her troubled past, abuse, addiction, and mental health struggles, but the courts held firm. On November 2, 1984, at Central Prison in Raleigh, the execution process began. Strapped to a gurney, Velma received a 3-drug cocktail: sodium thiopental to sedate, pancuronium bromide to paralyze, and potassium chloride to stop her heart. Her final meal was simple: a Coke and a bag of cheese doodles. In her last moments, Velma, now 52, spoke softly. "I want to say that I am sorry for all the hurt I have caused. I know that Jesus Christ has forgiven me." At 2:15 a.m., she was pronounced dead, the first woman executed in the U.S. since 1962. Witnesses noted her calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the chaos she left behind. In the summer of 1983, Houston, Texas was rocked by a crime so brutal it defied comprehension. Carla Fay Tucker, a 23-year-old with a troubled past, stood at the center of it. Born to a broken home, Carla had turned to drugs and prostitution by her teens. Her victim, Jerry Lynn Dean, 27, was a motorcycle enthusiast and mechanic, a man trying to carve out a life despite his own struggles. Jerry and Carla had a rocky history, clashing over a failed relationship and stolen property. On June 13, 1983, fueled by drugs and rage, Carla and her boyfriend, Danny Garrett, broke into Jerry's apartment to steal his motorcycle, but the plan spiraled into horror. Finding Jerry asleep, Danny struck him with a hammer, shattering his skull. As Jerry gurgled in agony, Carla grabbed a pickaxe and delivered 28 blows, later claiming she wanted to stop his noise. Then she noticed Deborah Thornton, a 32-year-old mother, hiding in the room. Deborah, separated from her husband, had met Jerry by chance that night. Carla turned the pickaxe on her, striking 23 times and embedding the weapon in Deborah's heart. The savagery shocked even seasoned investigators. Blood-soaked walls and the pickaxe's grim placement told a story of unrestrained violence. 5 weeks later, a tip led police to Carla and Danny. Carla's own boasts about the killings sealed her fate. Carla's trial in 1984 was a media frenzy. Prosecutors called her a remorseless killer, while her defense argued drug addiction drove her actions. The jury convicted her of double murder, sentencing her to death at age 24. Danny received the same but died in prison in 1993. Carla's appeal spanned 14 years, gaining international attention when she converted to Christianity on death row. Supporters, including Pope John Paul II pleaded for clemency, citing her redemption, but Texas law was unforgiving. On February 3, 1998, at Huntsville Unit, Carla, now 38, faced lethal injection. The process mirrored Velma's sedative, paralytic heart stopper. Her final meal was light: a banana, a peach, and a salad with ranch dressing. Strapped to the gurney, Carla's last words were heartfelt: "I am so sorry, I hope God gives you peace." At 6:45 p.m. she was declared dead. Witnesses, including Deborah's family, saw no remorse in her eyes, only a woman at peace with her fate. Carla's execution, the first of a woman in Texas since 1863, left a nation divided. Was she a monster or a redeemed soul? In a small Missouri town in 2004, a crime so grotesque unfolded that it etched itself into the annals of American horror. Lisa Montgomery, a 36-year-old mother of 4, lived a life marred by abuse and mental illness. Her victim, Bobby Jo Stinnett, 23, was a vibrant dog breeder, 8 months pregnant with her first child. The two women connected online over their shared love of dogs, but Lisa had a sinister motive. Desperate to claim a baby as her own after faking a pregnancy, Lisa drove from Kansas to Bobby Jo's home in Skidmore, Missouri on December 16, 2004. Posing as a buyer for a puppy, Lisa entered the house, then strangled Bobby Jo with a rope. Using a kitchen knife, she cut open Bobby Jo's womb, removing the fetus, a girl who miraculously survived. Lisa fled with the baby, passing her off as her own. Bobby Jo's mother found her daughter's body hours later, the scene a tableau of unimaginable cruelty. A digital trail, emails and IP addresses led police to Lisa within 24 hours. The baby was recovered unharmed, but the damage was done. Lisa's 2007 federal trial was a battle of narratives. Prosecutors called her crime a staggering brutality, emphasizing premeditation. Her defense argued severe mental illness, psychosis, and a history of childhood trauma rendered her incompetent, but the jury didn't believe her story. At 39, Lisa was sentenced to death, one of only 3 women on federal death row. Appeals lasted 13 years, with her lawyers fighting to prove her mental state barred execution. The Supreme Court rejected her final pleas. On January 13, 2021, at Terre Haute, Indiana, Lisa, now 52, faced lethal injection. The protocol was clinical, a single drug, pentobarbital, to induce death. Her final meal went unreported, but her last words were quiet: no. At 1:31 a.m. she was pronounced dead. Witnesses, including Bobby Jo's family, saw a woman who showed no remorse, only defeat. Lisa's execution, the first federal execution of a woman in 67 years, reignited debates about mental illness and the death penalty. Was justice served, or was a broken woman punished? In the humid heat of Florida in 1987, a series of murders along the highways turned heads toward a woman who seemed an unlikely killer. Eileen Warnos, a 31-year-old drifter and sex worker, lived a life scarred by abuse and abandonment. Her victims were men who crossed her path, men like Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old shop owner with a troubled past, and 6 others, all middle-aged, all killed between 1989 and 1990. Richard, a loner who enjoyed the open road, picked up Eileen hitchhiking in November 1989. What began as a transaction turned deadly. Eileen claimed self-defense, alleging Richard attempted to assault her, but the evidence told a different story. Richard was shot 9 times with a .22 caliber pistol, his body dumped in a wooded area near Daytona Beach. Over the next year, Eileen killed 6 more men. David Spears, 43, a construction worker; Charles Carskadden, 40, a part-time rodeo worker; Peter Seams, 65, a retired merchant seaman; Troy Burris, 50, a sausage salesman; Charles Humphreys, 56, a retired police chief; and Walter Antonio, 62, a truck driver. Each was shot multiple times, their bodies left in remote areas, their cars stolen. Eileen's motive, prosecutors later argued, was robbery and a deep-seated rage against men. The investigation broke open in 1990 when Eileen and her girlfriend, Tyria Moore, wrecked Peter Seams' car. Fingerprints, pawned belongings, and Tyria's cooperation led police to Eileen. She confessed to the killings, but insisted they were acts of survival. Her 1992 trial for Richard Mallory's murder was a media circus. Prosecutors painted her as a predatory serial killer, while her defense argued her traumatic life, rape, incest, homelessness, shaped her actions. The jury didn't believe her story. At 35, Eileen was convicted and sentenced to death, eventually receiving 6 death sentences for the other murders. Appeals spanned a decade, with Eileen oscillating between remorse and defiance. On October 9, 2002, at Florida State Prison, Eileen, now 46, faced lethal injection. The process was methodical: sodium thiopental to sedate, pancuronium bromide to paralyze, potassium chloride to stop her heart. Her final meal was a simple cup of black coffee. Strapped to the gurney, Eileen's last words were cryptic: "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6, like the movie Big Mothership and all. I'll be back." At 9:47 a.m. she was pronounced dead. Witnesses noted her defiant stare, a final act of rebellion from a woman the media dubbed America's first female serial killer. But was she a monster or a victim of her own broken past? In the quiet suburbs of Illinois in 1989, a crime unfolded that shattered a community's sense of safety. Judy Buenoano, a 45-year-old businesswoman, appeared to be a devoted mother and entrepreneur, but beneath her polished exterior lay a trail of death. Her victim, John Gentry, 39, was her fiancé, a successful businessman who trusted Judy with his life and his finances. John had a stable life, raising 2 children from a previous marriage, unaware of Judy's dark history. In 1983, Judy began poisoning John with arsenic, slipping it into his food and drinks. He suffered nausea, dizziness, and weakness for weeks, but survived a car bomb Judy planted in his vehicle, a failed attempt to finish him off. Suspicion led police to dig deeper, uncovering Judy's past. Her first husband, James Goodyear, 40, died in 1971 from mysterious symptoms. Her disabled son, Michael, 19, drowned in 1980 after being poisoned, and her boyfriend, Bobby Joe Morris, 37, died in 1978 under similar circumstances. All deaths were linked to arsenic, and Judy had collected over $240,000 in insurance payouts. The evidence was overwhelming. Chemical analysis, financial records, and John's survival story pointed to a calculated black widow. Judy's 1984 trial in Florida captivated the nation. Prosecutors called her a greedy manipulator who killed for profit, while her defense claimed the deaths were coincidental or accidental. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder for James Goodyear's death, later adding convictions for Michael and attempted murder for John. At 46, she was sentenced to death. Appeals lasted 14 years, with her lawyers arguing insufficient evidence and gender bias, but the courts upheld her sentence. On March 30, 1998, at Florida State Prison, Judy, now 54, faced the electric chair, a method chosen over lethal injection due to Florida's protocols at the time. Strapped into Old Sparky, a 2,000-volt current surged through her body for seconds, stopping her heart. Her final meal was broccoli, asparagus, strawberries, and hot tea, a refined choice for a calculated killer. Judy offered no final words, only silence. At 7:13 a.m., she was pronounced dead. Witnesses, including James Goodyear's family, saw a woman who showed no remorse, only a stoic acceptance of her fate. Judy's execution marked Florida's first electrocution of a woman, leaving behind questions of greed and the limits of deception.
In the rural heartland of Oklahoma in 1993, a crime so chilling emerged that it seemed ripped from a nightmare. Wanda Jean Allen, a 34-year-old with a history of violence, lived a turbulent life marked by poverty and a quick temper. Her victim, Gloria Leathers, 29, was her girlfriend, a woman with dreams of building a stable life despite her own struggles with addiction and domestic disputes. Wanda and Gloria's relationship was volatile, marred by arguments and physical altercations. On December 5, 1988, outside an Oklahoma City police station, their final fight turned deadly. After a heated argument, Wanda shot Gloria in the abdomen with a handgun, leaving her to bleed out on the pavement. Gloria, a mother and aspiring nurse, died hours later in a hospital, her dreams cut short. Wanda fled but was arrested days later. Witnesses and ballistic evidence confirmed her as the shooter, and her claim of self-defense unraveled when investigators found no immediate threat from Gloria. The motive? A lethal mix of jealousy and rage, fueled by their crumbling relationship. Wanda's 1989 trial was emotionally charged. Prosecutors argued she acted with premeditation, citing a prior manslaughter conviction for killing another friend in Her defense claimed low IQ and emotional instability mitigated her guilt, but the jury convicted her of first-degree murder. At 35, Wanda was sentenced to death. Appeals spanned 12 years, with her lawyers arguing intellectual disability and ineffective counsel, but the courts rejected clemency, even as activists rallied for her life. On January 11, 2001, at Oklahoma State Penitentiary, Wanda, now 41, faced lethal injection. The protocol was standard, a 3-drug cocktail to sedate, paralyze, and stop her heart. Her final meal was unreported, but her last words were poignant. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." At 9:21 p.m., she was pronounced dead. Witnesses noted her tears, a rare glimpse of vulnerability from a woman whose life was defined by violence. Wanda's execution, the first of a black woman in Oklahoma's modern era, sparked debates about race, disability, and the death penalty. Did justice prevail, or was a troubled soul failed by the system? In the small town of Wetumpka, Alabama in 1988, a crime unfolded that shattered a family and stunned a community. Linda Lyon Block, a 40-year-old former librarian, lived a life on the fringes, driven by anti-government beliefs and a fierce sense of independence. Her victim, Roger Motley, 38, was a beloved police sergeant, a husband and father of 2, known for his dedication to protecting his town. Roger's life was rooted in service, coaching Little League and mentoring young officers. On May 10, 1993, Linda and her common-law husband, George Sibley, were on the run after a string of minor crimes tied to their libertarian idea. When Roger approached their car at a shopping center, suspecting it matched a warrant, Linda opened fire with a 9mm pistol, shooting him 8 times in the chest and head. Roger collapsed, his life extinguished in seconds, as shoppers screamed and fled. Linda and George sped away, leaving behind a scene of chaos and a town in mourning. The motive was chillingly ideological. Linda saw Roger as a symbol of a government she despised. But what did she do to end up on death row? The manhunt was swift. Within hours, Linda and George were cornered in a standoff, surrendering after a tense exchange with police. The investigation uncovered a trove of evidence: the murder weapon, Linda's fingerprints, and witness accounts placing her as the shooter. Her 1994 trial in Alabama was a clash of ideologies. Prosecutors called her a cold-blooded cop killer, emphasizing her premeditated intent. Her defense argued she acted in fear, believing Roger posed a threat, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury didn't believe her story. At 41, Linda was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death, as was George, who was executed in 2. Appeals lasted nearly a decade, with Linda representing herself, filing motions claiming the government lacked jurisdiction over her. The courts rejected her claim. On May 10, 2002, at Holman Correctional Facility, Linda, now 54, faced the electric chair, Alabama's method until lethal injection became standard. Strapped to Yellow Mama, a 2,300-volt surge coursed through her body, stopping her heart in seconds. Her final meal was unreported, and she refused to give a last statement, staring defiantly at the witnesses. At 12:01 a.m., she was pronounced dead. Roger's family, among the observers, saw no remorse, only a woman consumed by her belief. Linda's execution, Alabama's first of a woman in 45 years, raised questions. Was she a terrorist or a misguided zealot? In the rural quiet of Arkansas in 1989, a crime so sinister emerged that it seemed to defy human comprehension. Christina Marie Riggs, a 28-year-old single mother and licensed nurse, struggled with depression and financial strain. Her victims were her own children, Justin, 5, and Shelby, 2. Two bright souls who loved their mother despite their hardship. Justin was a kindergartner with a contagious laugh, while Shelby was a curious toddler with big dreams ahead. On November 4, 1997, in Sherwood, Arkansas, Christina's despair turned deadly. Driven by a belief that her children would be better off in heaven, she planned their deaths with chilling precision. She injected Justin with potassium chloride, a drug used in executions, stolen from her workplace, but the dose only caused him pain. Panicking, she smothered him with a pillow, then repeated the act with Shelby, suffocating her tiny body. Christina then attempted suicide with an overdose of antidepressants, but survived. The next morning, a relative found the children's bodies tucked into bed, their faces peaceful but lifeless, and Christina unconscious nearby. The scene was a heart-wrenching tableau of a mother's broken mind. The investigation was swift and devastating. Autopsies confirmed smothering as the cause of death, and Christina's suicide note detailed her actions, confessing her intent to free her children. Her 1998 trial gripped Arkansas. Prosecutors argued her nursing expertise made her crimes calculated, while her defense pleaded severe depression and mental illness. The jury convicted her of 2 counts of capital murder, sentencing her to death. Appeals spanned 3 years, with her lawyers arguing her mental state warranted mercy, but Christina waived further appeals, saying she wanted to join her children. On May 2000, at Arkansas's Cummins Unit, Christina, now 31, faced lethal injection. The process was clinical: a 3-drug cocktail, sodium thiopental, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride, delivered through an IV. Her final meal, a shocking request: a supreme pizza, salad, apple pie, and a Coke. Strapped to the gurney, Christina's last words were for her children: "I love you, my babies." At 9:28 p.m., she was pronounced dead. Witnesses, including her mother, saw tears streaming down her face, a mother haunted by her own action. Christina's execution, Arkansas's first of a woman since 1845, left a nation grappling with mental illness and the death penalty. Was she a murderer or a victim of her own mind? In the sprawling suburbs of California in 1992, a crime so calculated unfolded that it chilled even seasoned detective. Lois Nadean Smith, a 51-year-old grandmother, lived a life marked by addiction and volatile relationships. Her victim, Cindy Bally, 21, was the ex-girlfriend of Lois's son Greg, a young woman trying to rebuild her life after a tumultuous romance. Cindy was a college student, with dreams of becoming a teacher, known for her kindness and resilience. On July 4, 1982, in Hugo, Oklahoma, Lois orchestrated a deadly reunion. Believing Cindy had threatened Greg's life, Lois lured her to a motel under the pretense of reconciliation. There, Lois and Greg confronted Cindy. Fueled by alcohol and rage, Lois stabbed Cindy 9 times with a knife, shot her in the throat with a pistol, and as Cindy lay dying, taunted her, crushing her skull with a heavy glass bottle. The brutality was staggering. Blood-soaked sheets and Cindy's broken body told a story of unrelenting vengeance. Lois and Greg fled, but Cindy's body was found hours later, sparking a manhunt. The investigation hinged on Greg's confession, which implicated his mother as the mastermind. Forensic evidence, blood type, knife wounds, and gunshot residue tied Lois to the scene. Her 1983 trial in Oklahoma was a spectacle of family dysfunction. Prosecutors called her a sadistic manipulator, while her defense argued alcohol addiction and Greg's influence diminished her culpability. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder, sentencing her to death at 52. Appeals dragged on for nearly 2 decades, with her lawyers citing ineffective counsel and gender bias, but the courts upheld her sentence. On December 4, 2001, at Oklahoma State Penitentiary, Lois, now 61, faced lethal injection. The protocol mirrored others, a 3-drug sequence to end her life. Her final meal was unreported, and her last words were brief: "My apologies to the Bally family." At 9:30, she was pronounced dead. Witnesses, including Cindy's parents, saw a woman who seemed resigned, her defiance gone. Lois's execution, Oklahoma's second of a woman in the modern era, reignited debates about family loyalty and retribution. Did her crime justify her fate, or was she a product of her own demons? In the small town of Pampa, Texas, in 1984, a crime so horrific unfolded that it left an entire community reeling. Frances Newton, a 19-year-old mother, lived a life strained by financial hardship and a troubled marriage. Her victims were her own family, her husband, Adrian Newton, 23, a mechanic with dreams of providing for his young family, their son Alton, 7, a bright first grader who loved baseball, and their daughter Farah, 21 months, a joyful toddler just learning to speak. Adrian was a hard-working man, devoted to his children, despite tensions with Frances over money and infidelity. On April 7, 1987, Frances lured Adrian, Alton, and Farah to their apartment under the guise of a family discussion. There, with chilling precision, she shot each of them with a .25 caliber pistol, Adrian in the chest, Alton in the head, and Farah through her tiny heart. The crime scene was a nightmare. Blood pooled on the floor, the bodies left where they fell. Frances claimed an unknown intruder was responsible, but her story unraveled quickly. Her motive, a $100,000 life insurance policy she had taken out on Adrian and the children just weeks before, a desperate bid to escape debt. But what did she do to end up on death row? The investigation moved swiftly. Police found the murder weapon, a .25 caliber pistol hidden in a relative's home, linked to Frances through ballistic evidence. Gunpowder residue on her hands and a recent insurance application in her name sealed her fate. The evidence was overwhelming. Her 1988 trial in Houston was a clash of narratives. Prosecutors painted Frances as a greedy, cold-hearted killer who murdered her own children for profit, while her defense argued she was framed, citing a lack of direct witnesses and her claims of innocence. The jury didn't believe her story. At 23, Frances was convicted of 3 counts of capital murder and sentenced to death. Appeals spanned 17 years, with her lawyers raising issues of faulty forensics, ineffective counsel, and racial bias. Frances was a black woman in a system often criticized for disparities. Despite last-minute pleas, no stays were granted. On September 14, 2005, at Huntsville Unit in Texas, Frances, now 40, faced lethal injection. The process was clinical: a 3-drug cocktail, sodium thiopental to sedate, pancuronium bromide to paralyze, and potassium chloride to stop her heart, delivered through an IV. Her final meal was simple. She declined a special request, accepting the standard prison fare. Strapped to the gurney, Frances's last words were defiant yet remorseful. "I did not kill my family. I love them. Tell my family I love them." At 6:11 p.m., she was pronounced dead. Witnesses, including Adrian's relatives, saw a woman who maintained her innocence to the end, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Francis's execution, Texas's second of a woman in the modern era, reignited debates about race, evidence, and the death penalty. Was she a monster or a woman wronged by circumstance? Francis Newton's story closes our exploration of 10 women whose crimes shook America to its core. From poison to pickaxes, from ideological rage to desperate greed, their actions left scars that time cannot erase. Their trials tested the limits of justice, and their executions forced us to confront the cost of retribution. As the gavel falls and the chamber empties, one question lingers. Can we ever truly understand the darkness that drives such evil? Or is the truth buried with them, lost in the silence of the grave? What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments and drop a like to support our channel.